Beneath the Pacific Shadows. This is a work of fiction and does not draw from real events. All characters, incidents, and places depicted herein are entirely a product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Seattle that October evening, blurring the neon reflections on slick sidewalks and pooling in dark corners along forgotten alleys. Michael Thompson sat alone in the dim light of his study, the unsteady glow of a solitary desk lamp casting trembling shadows against the paneled walls. The atmosphere of the old Victorian house, nestled in the heart of a quiet Pacific Northwest neighborhood, felt as if it were holding its breath, awaiting some terrible revelation that Michael himself could scarcely imagine. For months, Michael had been wrestling with a vague unease, a relentless internal whisper that something was terribly amiss. The serenity of his domestic life, shared with his wife Emily Carter and their precocious daughter Lucy, had begun to splinter under the weight of secret glances, hushed arguments in the dead of night, and unexplained absences. The facade of normality was crumbling, and with each creak of the floorboards, Michael felt his heart sink deeper into a realm of suspicion and anxiety. He remembered the first time he noticed the subtle change. It had been an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that slipped by without ceremony. Emily's eyes, usually warm and inviting, had flashed with something cold and distant during breakfast. "I just have a lot on my mind," she murmured, her voice faltering as she stared out the window at the lashing rain. Michael had nodded, attributing her obvious distress to the pressures of work and the ceaseless demands of parenting. But now, late at night, when the world was reduced to the sound of raindrops against glass and a low hum from the ancient heating system, the memories took on an even more sinister hue. In the weeks that followed, Michael discovered small anomalies: a misplaced photograph, a scrap of paper inscribed with confusing notes, a locked drawer that suddenly became a source of both dread and morbid curiosity. The veneer of his once safe home was peeling away, revealing not only the physical scars of time but also a tapestry of secrets woven into its very walls. With reluctant resolve, he began to retrace Emily's evasive footsteps, piecing together fragments of conversations that, like ghostly echoes, whispered of betrayals and hidden pasts. Late one stormy night, as the wind howled through the pines surrounding his home in Seattle's Ballard district, Michael ventured into the hidden recesses of the house. In a forgotten room, behind a sliding bookcase in the library, he discovered an old, battered diary. Its leather cover was cracked from time and neglect, the pages yellowed and stained. As he leafed through the entries, a narrative of a passionate yet troubled marriage emerged, a reflection of his own, yet marred by details he could not reconcile with the Emily he knew. The diary was penned in a neat, flowing hand, describing long nights of anguish, cryptic warnings, and unspoken promises that seemed to straddle the boundary between reality and nightmare. "Michael, are you still awake?" a soft voice pulled him from his reverie. He startled and clutched the diary to his chest, his pulse racing. Emily stood at the threshold, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. He stammered, uncertain whether he should reveal his discovery. Emily hesitated before replying, "I thought you'd gone to sleep. Sometimes I worry that you're searching for answers in places you shouldn't." Her tone was gentle, but it carried an edge that made Michael's heart sink. "What are you talking about?" he pressed, his voice trembling between anger and desperation. The room seemed to close in around them, the quiet hum of the storm outside amplifying every word. Later that night, while Lucy slept fitfully in her room, Michael and Emily sat in the living room, the silence between them punctuated by the erratic rhythm of the rain. "There are things about our past, about us, that you keep hidden," Michael said softly, his eyes locked on hers. "I found a diary, Emily. Who is she, really? And why does everything feel like it's built on lies?" Emily's face contorted into a mask of sorrow and regret. "Some truths, Michael, are too painful to unearth," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I've carried these secrets for years, trying desperately to hide them from you. But as the rain washes away the veneer of our life, the past reclaims its space, and I can no longer escape it." In the following days, the tension in the household grew like an insidious fog. Michael found himself drawn into a labyrinth of half-truths and repressed memories, questioning whether he really knew the woman he'd married. Over cups of bitter coffee in the cramped kitchen of their modest home in the Fremont neighborhood, Michael and Emily's conversations grew increasingly fraught with unsaid confessions and desperate half-apologies. "I never meant to hurt you," Emily would say, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, only to fall silent when Michael reached out for more details. The echo of her unspoken words reverberated in the cold, empty spaces of their domestic life. Desperate for perspective, Michael turned to his longtime friend Daniel Stevens, a pragmatic editor with a wry sense of humor and a penchant for uncovering truths. One misty afternoon in a quiet coffee shop near Pike Place Market, Michael recounted everything, his voice barely concealing his inner turmoil. "I'm struggling to understand Emily, Daniel. There are pieces of our life that don't add up. It's like living in a house with hidden rooms I never knew existed." Daniel sipped his espresso thoughtfully before replying, "People have a way of keeping parts of themselves locked away, Michael. But sometimes those locked away parts have a way of screaming to be heard, especially when darkness falls around you. Just be careful, my friend. The line between truth and madness is thinner than you'd think." That warning haunted Michael as the days bled into restless nights. He began to meticulously document every strange encounter, every cryptic remark, and every silent tear that slipped from Emily's eyes. His investigation led him to obscure corners of Seattle's history, dusty records in the city archives, and whispered rumors among the elderly residents of the neighborhood in Capitol Hill. In these half-forgotten tales, he discovered unsettling similarities to his own life, a pattern of secrecy, betrayal, and inexplicable tragedies that seemed to ripple outward like shockwaves through time. One particularly dismal evening, while the wind raged outside and rain pounded against the windows, Michael's search took him to a dilapidated warehouse near the Seattle waterfront. He had followed the trail of an old letter addressed to Ms. Carter, which hinted at a clandestine meeting and a secret too dangerous to remain buried. There, in a corner dimly lit by a flickering overhead light, he met Robert, a gaunt and enigmatic man with a past steeped in regret and secrets. "I knew you'd come," Robert said quietly, his eyes reflecting a sorrow that belied his gruff exterior. "Emily's history is more tangled than you can imagine. There are forces at work that defy explanation, forces that have haunted her for as long as I've known her." Michael's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, forces? Are you talking about the supernatural?" Robert shook his head slowly. "Not in the literal sense, a ghost or a demon, but rather the burdens of guilt, the weight of choices made in moments of desperation. Emily made a decision long ago that set in motion a chain of events too painful to forget. The diary you found is only one piece of that puzzle. There are parts of her life that have been deliberately erased, hidden away like scars beneath flawless skin." The conversation with Robert left Michael reeling. He returned home with the letter burning in his pocket, his mind swirling with half-formed theories and a pervasive dread that something monstrous was lurking beneath the surface of his family's carefully constructed life. Every creak in the old floorboards, every whispered murmur in the quiet of the night, now resonated with an ominous portent. At home, Emily's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would vanish for hours without explanation, emerging disheveled and unnaturally silent. When confronted, she always seemed to deflect with a practiced, almost sinister grace. "I'm sorry, Michael," she would say with an unsettling calm, "but there are parts of my past that I must confront alone." Yet the look in her eyes during these exchanges was one of resigned torment, a silent plea for forgiveness, or perhaps a warning to stay away. The domestic tension reached a fever pitch one rainy midnight when Michael awoke to the sound of shattering glass. Rushing to the kitchen, he found Emily standing over a broken window, her silhouette outlined by the flashing blue and red lights of a police car outside. "Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the storm, "if you love me, please promise me that you'll trust me when I say that I'm trying to protect you from something far more dangerous than either of us can imagine." Stunned, Michael could only watch as she retreated into the shadows of the hall. His mind raced with visions of betrayal, of hidden enemies, and of something lurking just beyond the grasp of reason. The authorities arrived soon after, but their cursory investigation yielded nothing more than a shattered window and a cryptic note scrawled in an unfamiliar hand, reading simply, "The past never dies." In the days that followed, the once familiar contours of Michael's life blurred into a nightmarish tapestry of suspicion and dread. He became a prisoner in his own home, the boundaries between reality and illusion dissolving with every relentless drizzle that swept through Seattle's streets. He found himself pacing the creaking floors, consumed by the need to uncover the truth, even as it threatened to tear his sanity apart piece by piece. One rainy afternoon, Michael mustered the courage to confront Emily directly. In the cramped confines of their living room, he demanded, "Emily, I need to know, what are you hiding? Who is this woman from your past that haunts every corner of our lives?" Emily's eyes, dark and troubled, met his with a resolve that was equal parts sorrow and defiance. "Michael," she began, her voice wavering yet determined, "I've tried to shield you from the horrors of my past, from the mistakes I made when I was lost in despair. But now you're forcing me to confront them, whether I like it or not. There was someone, a man I once loved, a man who promised me the world and then left me adrift in a sea of violence and betrayal. I thought I could bury him, forget his name, erase the memories. But, some things cannot be erased, and his shadow follows me everywhere." Michael's heart pounded as he absorbed her confession. "Who was he, Emily? What did he do?" Her voice dropped to a mournful whisper. "His name was Richard Wallace. I was young and naive. I believed him when he said he would take me away from everything that was painful. Instead, he led me down a path of cruelty and exploitation that I've spent my entire life trying to escape. I never thought that his sins would reverberate all the way to our doorstep." In that moment, the fragile dam holding back Michael's mounting suspicions shattered completely. His mind, already reeling from the discovered diary and Robert's cryptic words, now overflowed with a torrent of images, visions of a predatory Richard, of a desperate woman cornered by her past, and of a family caught in a tightening vice of secrets and lies. "Emily," he exclaimed, his voice raw and pained, "why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why did you let these lies fester?" Emily's eyes filled with tears as she replied, "I was terrified, Michael. I was terrified that the truth would destroy everything we built. I took an oath with myself to never let the past dictate our future. But now, with everything coming undone, I fear I can no longer hide from it." Over the next few tumultuous weeks, the spectre of Richard Wallace seemed to pursue the family like a relentless ghost. Strange phone calls rang through the night, and unmarked envelopes containing cryptic photographs of Emily were delivered to their doorstep. Michael, increasingly isolated by his own obsession with the truth, turned to Sarah Miller, a sharp-witted investigative journalist from Tacoma with a reputation for unearthing dark secrets. Over late-night meetings in smoky bars and long drives along winding coastal roads, Sarah and Michael pieced together fragments of a murky history that pointed towards a network of deceit, exploitation, and a cycle of violence that stretched back decades. During one such encounter at a small diner in downtown Tacoma, Sarah leaned in close and said in a hushed tone, "Michael, sometimes the past is not what it seems. There are layers, each more disturbing than the one before. Richard Wallace wasn't just a man, he was a symbol of a corruption that has seeped into the very fabric of these communities. People like him leave a trail that's hard to follow because each clue is coated in fear and regret." Her words ignited something within Michael, a fierce determination to confront the darkness head-on, even if it meant risking everything he held dear. With Sarah's help, he began a methodical search for answers, revisiting old neighborhoods in Capitol Hill, interviewing aging locals who recalled whispers of unspeakable events, and delving into obscure archives in the hushed corridors of the Seattle Public Library. Each discovery, rather than providing clarity, only deepened the mystery, forcing Michael to reconsider the nature of memory, guilt, and the inescapable pull of fate. As the investigation progressed, the boundaries between the tangible and the metaphysical began to blur. Michael could no longer be sure if the strange lights that danced in the mist over Puget Sound were a trick of the weather or a manifestation of the remorse and anguish that haunted Emily. At times, he felt as if he were haunted by a spectral presence, the very embodiment of past sins trying to reclaim their place in the present. One evening, while staring out over the dark, churning waters of Elliott Bay from their apartment's balcony, Michael heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper carried on the wind, a voice that seemed to say, "You cannot escape what is written in the shadows." The relentless anxiety that had taken root in Michael's heart began to unravel the fabric of his very being. His once orderly thoughts were now a tangled web of suspicions and half-remembered nightmares. The domestic sphere, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a battleground where trust was the first casualty and every word exchanged carried the potential to ignite further chaos. Even Lucy, their gentle daughter, seemed to sense the mounting tension, her clarion questions and plaintive inquiries about why her mother often disappeared into rooms locked and dark left an indelible mark on Michael's troubled conscience. One dismal night, as the wind howled through the corridors of the old house and the rain drummed a steady tattoo on the roof, Michael confronted Emily in a moment of desperate clarity. "I've been living in a nightmare, Emily," he said, his eyes searching hers for an anchor in the storm. "But I cannot bear the weight of these secrets any longer. You must let me in. I need to understand the woman who lives next door to me every day, the woman I thought I knew so well." Emily's resistance faltered under the intensity of his plea. With tears cascading down her cheeks, she finally relented. "Michael, I have tried for so long to keep the darkness at bay, not just for my sake but for Lucy's as well. I thought that by locking away my past, I could create a life free from regret. But the truth is a living thing, and it has a way of clawing its way out when you least expect it." Her admission was followed by long, anguished silence, a silence filled with the sound of the rain mingling with the unspoken weight of shared despair. Over the course of several heart-wrenching hours, Emily recounted the painful details of her youth, how Richard Wallace had manipulated her with promises of escape and salvation, and how the vivid images of his cruelty had continued to haunt her, even as she tried to build a semblance of a normal life in Seattle. Each word she uttered was laced with remorse, each memory a bitter reminder of a time when hope had been a fragile illusion. In the days that followed, Michael and Emily found themselves teetering on the edge of a precipice. The revelations had shattered the delicate foundation of their marriage, leaving behind only fragments of trust and a lingering sense of impending doom. Michael oscillated between a burning desire to save the woman he loved and a paralyzing fear that his relentless pursuit of the truth might ultimately doom them all. His nights were filled with restless dreams, visions of shadowy figures and dark corridors that pressed in on him from all sides. And throughout it all, the ominous presence of Richard Wallace seemed to hover ever closer, an ever-present reminder that some pasts are too terrible to be forgotten. One morning, as the mist clung to the streets of Seattle like cobwebs, Michael awoke to find a series of unsettling notes pinned to the refrigerator, each message written in a hand that he suspected was not his own. One note read, "The sins of yesterday are etched in the heart of today." Another promised, "Some debts must be repaid in blood." The arrival of these messages was the final catalyst that propelled Michael into a fevered state of paranoia and resolve. Feeling both desperate and compelled by an unyielding need for closure, he began to assemble every piece of the puzzle, a mosaic of evidence that, once complete, might either exonerate him from the weight of his fears or condemn him to a fate worse than anything he had ever imagined. Late one autumn evening, in the flickering glow of dusk, Michael arranged a tense meeting with Sarah Miller at a secluded park on the outskirts of Seattle. In the rustling trees and the hollow sound of their footsteps against the damp pavement, she revealed a document that had been hidden away in the public records for decades, a court transcript detailing a case involving Richard Wallace and a series of unsolved crimes that had once rattled the community. "This transcript," Sarah explained quietly, "mentions names, places, and connections that are eerily similar to what you're experiencing now. It seems that Emily's past is intertwined with events so dark that even the local authorities dismissed them as urban legend." The revelation sent shivers down Michael's spine. In the dim light of the park, as leaves whispered secrets in the wind, he felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. With every word Sarah uttered, the threads of his reality seemed to unravel further, exposing a tapestry of conspiracy and heartache that defied conventional explanation. His thoughts circled incessantly around the possibility that the bond he shared with Emily was not merely a casualty of time and circumstance but a deliberate conduit through which ancient grievances and unresolved scores might exact their terrible vengeance. Back at home, the atmosphere had grown even more oppressive, thick with an unspoken anticipation. Michael pored over the evidence late into the night, the pages of the old diary and the yellowed transcripts melding into a disjointed narrative of betrayal, guilt, and a relentless pursuit of redemption. The once familiar contours of his world now bore the scars of hidden traumas, leaving him to wonder if the demons of the past had ever truly been banished or if they had merely been waiting in the shadows for a chance to resurface. One evening, as a frigid wind swept in from Puget Sound and sent an eerie chill through their home in the Queen Anne neighborhood, Michael and Emily found themselves alone in the quiet of the living room. The silence was broken only by the steady patter of rain on the window panes and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. "I'm so sorry, Michael," Emily said softly, her eyes reflecting a depth of regret and helplessness that left him momentarily speechless. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I tried to escape my past, to build a new life for us all. I only wished to protect you and Lucy." Michael reached out, his hand trembling as it hovered near hers. "Emily, I love you, and I want to believe that your intentions were pure. But these secrets, they're tearing us apart. We need to confront them together, no matter how painful or frightening the truth may be." His words, though earnest, carried the weight of an irrevocable inevitability, as if he were standing at the crossroads of destiny, compelled to face the monstrous legacy that had long haunted their lives. In the following days, the home became a crucible of raw emotion. Michael and Emily engaged in long, painful dialogues that traversed the terrain of memory and regret. They spoke of lost opportunities, of nights filled with unspeakable fear, and of a love that had been tainted by the presence of a ghost from Emily's past. "There is a time when we must choose," Emily whispered one night, her voice thick with emotion as she recalled a moment from her youth, "between living in denial and facing the abyss head-on. I chose denial because it was easier, but it has cost us dearly." The cascade of confessions eventually led to an irreparable turning point. Lucy, silent no longer, began to ask questions that cut to the core of their fractured family. "Mama, why do you cry when you think I'm asleep?" she asked once, her innocent eyes wide with confusion and sorrow. The question, simple in its delivery, was laden with an urgency that forced both her parents to confront the terrible truth hidden behind their stoic facades. As the days turned into weeks, the external world seemed to mirror the internal chaos of Michael's life. The oppressive weather of the Pacific Northwest, the relentless rain, the swirling mists, and the bleak skies became a constant reminder that the past could never be easily shaken off. The city itself, with its labyrinthine streets and melancholic history, seemed to conspire with the dark forces that had infiltrated Michael's home. Every alleyway, every abandoned building, and every whisper of wind carried with it a fragment of the mystery that now governed his existence. The climax of this torment arrived on a storm-lashed night that seemed to be the very embodiment of fate. Michael awoke to the sound of frantic knocking at the door. In a haze of dread and anticipation, he opened it to find Sarah Miller drenched and wild-eyed. "Michael," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the roar of the wind, "you need to come with me right now. I've discovered something that ties everything together. It's about Richard Wallace, about the true nature of his crimes, and it implicates forces that go beyond our understanding." Without a word, Michael gathered his resolve and, along with Sarah, embarked on a late-night journey through the storm. Their destination was a long-abandoned estate on the outskirts of Seattle, a relic from a bygone era that had long been shunned by the local populace. The estate, shrouded in an aura of decay and mystery, exuded an unsettling energy, as if it were the resting place of long-forgotten sins. The drive was tense and filled with an unspoken urgency, the headlights cutting swaths through the torrential rain as if chasing away shadows that clung desperately to the darkness. Upon reaching the estate, the duo discovered a series of meticulously preserved documents hidden in a sealed compartment behind a false wall in the Manor's study. The documents recounted the sordid history of Richard Wallace, a history filled with deception, exploitation, and a string of unsolved disappearances that stretched back decades. Among the pages, a single entry caught Michael's eye. It was a handwritten note, dated more than 30 years ago, in which Wallace detailed his unwilling involvement in a conspiracy designed to silence those who dared to defy him. The note, scrawled in jagged, almost frantic handwriting, bore not only the marks of a tormented soul but the unmistakable sense of impending doom. Back in Seattle, under the relentless drizzle that seemed to cleanse and condemn in equal measure, Michael confronted Emily with the startling revelations. "This isn't just about our past," he said with a tremor in his voice, "it's about a legacy of cruelty that continues to haunt us. Your silence, your pain, it wasn't just about protecting our family, was it? It was about keeping a secret that could destroy everything if ever brought to light." Emily's face crumpled under the weight of the truth. "I thought I was protecting you, Michael," she sobbed, "but I now see that by burying the past, I only gave it power over us. I allowed it to fester, to turn into a demon that even I could not control." In that moment, amidst the cacophony of driving rain and echoing memories, Michael realized that the darkness they faced was both external and internal, a manifestation of guilt, regret, and a family's desperate bid to outrun its own demons. The revelation was both liberating and excruciating. It demanded a reckoning, a confrontation with the painful truths they had long denied, and a commitment to forge a future unburdened by the sins of the past. In the days that followed, as the storm slowly gave way to a brittle, somber calm, Michael and Emily embarked on the arduous path of healing. They sought counseling, both for themselves and for Lucy, determined to rebuild a family life that had been fractured by secrets and lies. The journey was neither linear nor free of setbacks. There were moments of relapse into old patterns of silence and despair, moments when the horrors of the past threatened to overwhelm them anew. But slowly, with each shared tear and every halting conversation, the couple began to stitch together a fragile tapestry of forgiveness and understanding. Yet, even as they tentatively embraced the possibility of renewal, the dark legacy of Richard Wallace and the uncanny forces that had once conspired to control their fate continued to cast long shadows over their existence. Michael found himself haunted by dreams of spectral figures drifting along the rain-slicked streets of Seattle and disembodied voices whispering warnings in the dead of night. He wondered, in the quiet moments before dawn, whether the scars of the past would ever fully fade, or if they would remain as indelible reminders of a time when darkness reigned supreme. There were still unanswered questions. What truly happened to Richard Wallace? Who were the unseen puppeteers orchestrating the tragedies that had upended their lives? And, most haunting of all, was there a part of Emily that was irrevocably lost to the terror of her past, a part that might one day resurface with a vengeance? Michael knew that the answers might forever remain shrouded in mystery, locked away in the hidden recesses of memory and regret. As autumn yielded to a bleak winter and the chill of the Pacific Northwest seeped into every corner of their lives, Michael dedicated himself to ensuring that the darkness would no longer control their future. Together with Emily, he began to share their story bit by painful bit in a bid to reclaim their narrative and exorcise the demons that had haunted them for so long. Their confessions, raw and unfiltered, served as both a catharsis and a warning to others who might stand on the precipice of similar despair. It was during one of these quiet evenings, as the last vestiges of twilight faded into a moonlit silence, that Michael looked into Emily's eyes and saw the first glimmer of hope. Despite the scars and the lingering fear, there was a renewed determination, a promise forged in the crucible of suffering that they could create something better from the ruins of their past. "We must move forward," Michael said softly, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Not to forget, but to honor what we've endured and to ensure that this cycle of silence and darkness never repeats itself." Emily nodded, her voice resolute yet trembling. "I will no longer be a prisoner of my past. I want Lucy to grow up knowing that love and truth are stronger than the shadows that once tried to claim us." In the months that followed, while Seattle slowly thawed under the winter sun and the relentless rain gave way to tentative blue skies, Michael and Emily rebuilt their lives. Their story became a quiet beacon to others lost in the labyrinth of their own secrets, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness of the Pacific Northwest, the faintest glimmer of hope could guide one home. Neighborhood gatherings, therapy sessions, and public forums in local community centers paved the way for broader conversations about trust, redemption, and the importance of confronting rather than concealing the past. Slowly, the lived experience of their domestic nightmare transformed into a catalyst for healing, both for themselves and for an entire community that had long suffered in silence. Yet the past is an ever-present specter, and on quiet nights when the wind whispered through the tall pines of Washington, Michael sometimes felt the lingering touch of an unseen hand, a reminder that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of returning to the surface. The memory of Richard Wallace, his cruel promises, and the chain of events that followed, would forever be a part of their lives. But with each sunrise, Michael learned to embrace the fragile beauty of a life reclaimed and to see in every raindrop a symbol of renewal. And so, as the final pages of this bitter yet redemptive saga came into focus, Michael and Emily looked forward with cautious optimism. Their journey through the labyrinth of deceit, loss, and fear had irrevocably altered their souls, but it had also instilled in them an unyielding resolve, a belief that even in the aftermath of darkness, love could light the path toward healing. The quiet hum of Seattle at night, once a backdrop for despair, now resonated with the promise of new beginnings. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to my channel, like the video, and check the description for details on how to support my work.